Poland is leaving the so-called Istanbul Convention, which is a feminist treaty designed by the Council of Europe. I have already read the preamble and the first 4 chapters. Today I want to read chapter 5, which comes to show that the entire treaty is incredibly dull and repetitive, so I'm sorry for that. It is touching again on compensations and on how it creates incentives for women to claim that they were beaten, which is dangerous because you have to make sure that the only incentive for women to go to the police is justice and not some financial or other benefits. The chapter also touches a lot on topics that you would associate with a Muslim culture. It is only relevant really for Turkey, but they are also contemplating to leave. I would suggest that a lot of these problems have to be resolved in a different fashion than through that treaty. I do not think that committees and NGOs, more NGOs, pointing out to the fact that there are issues in Islam does anything to change that. All this knowledge is already widely available. What Turkey needs is actually more free speech. And this is not going to happen through some committees, through some additional sinecure offices. So let's start. Chapter 5, Substantive Law. Article 29, Civil Lawsuits and Remedies. Number 1, parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to provide victims with adequate civil remedies against the perpetrators. No incentives for calling the authorities. Number 2, parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to provide victims in accordance with the general principle of international law with adequate civil remedies against state authorities would have failed in their duty to take the necessary preventive or protective measures within the scope of their powers. It's just so insane. I mean, this entire let's put everybody under stress. We don't really know what we want and so forth, but, just put the pressure on and on and on. Article 30, compensations. I think I've said already everything about that, so I'll skip that. Article 31, custody, visitation, rights and safety. Parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that in the determination of custody and visitation rights of children, incidents of violence covered by the scope of these actions are taken into account. What legal system doesn't? Tell me. Number 2, parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that the exercise of any visitation or custody rights does not jeopardize the rights and safety of the victim or children. Again. Article 32, civil consequences of forced marriages. Parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that marriages concluded under force may be voidable, annulled, or dissolved without undue financial or administrative burden placed on the victim. Actually, that is a thing. There is an author, Necla Kelek, who had written a book about how many Turkish people in Germany, for example, are married off in arranged marriages. They're not necessarily forced, but arranged. This is a thing. But so far, I don't see the feminists to do anything about it. I think the problem can only be stopped when we limit immigration, because a lot of these arranged marriages are forged for the purpose of immigration, of getting people into the country who shouldn't come. And if we were more consistent with our immigration laws, then of course this would go away, and our Muslim communities would form normal romantic relationships like everybody else. Article 3, psychological violence. Parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that the intentional conduct of seriously impairing a person's psychological integrity through coercion or threats is criminalized. Okay, again, which country that has signed this contract have yet to create a law against coercion and threats? Stalking. Article 34. Parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that the intentional conduct of repeatedly engaging in threatening conduct directed at another person causing her or him to fear for her or his safety is criminalized. Same point as the one before. Article 35, physical violence. Parties shall take the necessary blah blah to ensure that the intentional conduct of committing acts of physical violence against another person is criminalized. It's so bloated and repetitive. Article 36, sexual violence, including rape. Number 1, parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that the following intentional conducts are criminalized, which is a engaging in non-consensual vaginal or oral penetration of a sexual nature of the body of another person with any bodily part or object, engaging in other non-consensual acts of sexual nature with a person, causing another person to engage in non-consensual acts of a sexual nature with a third person. Number 2, consent must be given voluntarily as the result of the person's free will, assessed in the context of the surrounding circumstances. Number 3, parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that the provisions of paragraph 1 also apply to acts committed against former or current spouses or partners as recognized by internal law. So I understand that some rape laws define rape as something extramarital. That used to be the case in Germany until 1993, I believe. And is probably the case in many countries around the world still today, but that's not so much a problem in Europe. So which signatory of this treaty had to change anything? Why do we even define rape again? Article 37, forced marriage. Number 1, parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that the intentional conduct of forcing an adult or a child to enter into a marriage is criminalized. I think that also is already the case. Number 2, parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that the intentional conduct of luring an adult or a child to the territory of a party or state other than the one she or he resides in with the purpose of forcing this adult or child to enter into a marriage is criminalized. Again, this is something that I don't see feminists to fight for. This is something that's only on the conservative agenda, right? This is really about stopping mass migration and getting a hold on the cultural differences that are in the country, assimilating those who are already here. This is not something feminists have been pushing for, and the Polish are probably the last people who have to act now. Likewise, this continues, Article 38, female genital mutilation. I think that's not a problem of conservatives. It's not a problem of the Polish. It is really some house cleaning to be done by the political left. It reads, parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that the following intentional conducts are criminalized: excising, infibulating, or performing any other mutilation to the whole or any part of a woman's labia majora, labia minora, or clitoris. B. Coercing or procuring a woman to undergo any of the acts listed in point A. Inciting, coercing, or procuring a girl to undergo any of the acts listed in point A. Homework of the left. I personally think this treaty does absolutely nothing in coercing the left to do these things. This is actually not something that you can tag off as done. This is something that won't be accomplished by being a member of this convention. This is something the left does not want to do, therefore it's not done. Article 39, forced abortion and forced sterilization, just skips that. Article 40, sexual harassment. And it's always the same. It's always the same text basically. Parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to do it. So okay, there should be sanctions for sexual harassment. There are. Article 41, aiding and abetting and attempt. I'm sure most of the legislations have laws against helping rape. If you stand guard while your friend is raping a woman, you will be punished for that. I think that's a law across all European countries. Article 42, unacceptable justification for crimes, including crimes committed in the name of so-called honor. And number 1, parties shall take the necessary legislative and other measures to ensure that in criminal proceedings initiated following the commission of any of the acts of violence covered by the scope of the Convention, culture, custom, religion, tradition, and so-called honor shall not be regarded as justification for such acts. Again, it's a left-wing problem. It's a left-wing problem, and this treaty does absolutely nothing to amend it. Number 2, parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that incitement by any person of a child to commit any of the acts referred to in paragraph 1 shall not diminish the criminal liability of that person for the acts committed. I'm not sure if that is English. Quite frankly, I don't think it is. But it sounds like they want to criminalize children. Like, if a child slaps a woman, then it should go to prison. Article 43, application of criminal offences. The offences established in accordance with this convention shall apply irrespective of the nature of the relationship between victim and perpetrator. Redundant. Article 44, jurisdiction, and this is totally redundant. This is really where does your jurisdiction apply? Come on, like on your ships and stuff. I think I'll just really skip that one. 5, sanctions and measures. Parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that the offences established in accordance with the convention are punishable by effective, proportionate, and dissuasive sanctions, taking into account their seriousness. As if they have to re-establish the entire legal system just for women. And just for women, like they're just lesser people. So I'll skip the rest of this. Article 46, aggravating circumstances. Parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to ensure that the following circumstances, insofar as they do not already form part of the constituent elements of the offences, may, in conformity with the relevant provisions of internal law, be taken into consideration as aggravating circumstances in the determination of the sentence in relation to the offences established in accordance with the convention. The aggravated factors are A. The offence was committed against the former or current spouse or partner as recognized by internal law by a member of the family, a person cohabiting with a victim, or a person having abused her or his authority. And quite frankly, I think this is something that must be left to internal debates within the countries, because this is somewhat contingent to the habits, feelings, and changing moral standings of a given population. I'm not quite sure if it's worse if a former spouse rapes a woman or if a perfect stranger does so. I personally think that creates a double standard given the mass immigration that we have right now. And I think actually this is just designed to upend the family, the institution of family, because I feel they are exploiting familial conflicts. B. The offense or related offenses were committed repeatedly. Every jurisdiction takes that into account. B. The offense was committed against a person made vulnerable by particular circumstances. It makes no sense. D. The offense was committed against or in the presence of a child. I'm not sure if I want them to negotiate all of this outside of public debate. I think, my main objection against most of these legal texts that I face at the moment is that I did not hear the debates about it. I did not hear the minutiae of it. I'm constantly lectured about the nitty-gritty of the yellow press talk with regards to our politicians. Politician A said this, politician B replied something else, and the hair of Donald Trump and so forth. And then I kind of am presented with should it be an aggravating factor in a criminal case if a child witnesses a husband beating his wife? Maybe, but I haven't heard a debate about it. It's strange, isn't it? Article 47 is an English test that I don't pass. Maybe you can, I'm not sure, I think you won't. It says a sentence is passed by another party in the title, and it reads, parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to provide for the possibility of taking into account final sentences passed by another party in relation to the offences established in accordance with this convention when determining the sentence. Article 48. Prohibition of mandatory alternative dispute resolution process or sentencing. I'm sure this is also an English test. Number 1. Parties shall take the necessary legislative or other measures to prohibit mandatory alternative dispute resolution processes, including mediation and conciliation, in relation to all forms of violence covered by the scope of the convention. As I said, I would really like to live in a society that just punishes criminals.